So I think as we see a continued growth in our more traditional industries like banking and healthcare, frankly, increase in precision manufacturing, that's interesting. And some of the new startup companies, I think people will put down the roots, and we need to see how we can make that happen and how we make it sustainable. I talked to one company that moved south. We have high energy costs and high healthcare costs, so those are barriers. We've tried to work to bring costs down, and I think we've done some work on it. We need to continue to do that. But one company had moved south to save energy costs, and they said, we moved back to Massachusetts because we want people with a good 8th grade education. So I think we underestimate how good our schools actually are and the investment that we make in schools and our high schools and our 2-year and then our 4-year colleges. That is particularly where a lot of the growth right now is in innovation and technology. And when you get that, you need the HR folks, and you need the other people who can fill in around those industries. I talked to one woman, the head of Edgewater Technology, Shirley Singleton, who left Edgewater Technology about 10 minutes before Michael McDermott went through and killed people back in 2000. If you remember,
that's the Wakefield company.
The
right?
Wakefield, Mako killing of 7 people. She would have been in his line of fire. She went out to return some Christmas presents 10 minutes before he killed 7 people. I talked to her not too long ago, and she's still there, head of Edgewater. I thought she would say, because I said, what are you looking for in terms of your workforce? And I thought she'd say, we need more people who can do science and technology. She said, I need people who can write. So that's good news for everybody here, right?
Yes.
You know, and for the news industry, look how it's changing, and the people who are going to be able to capture and communicate are also going to be hugely important in this new future. So investment in good education and those skills, not just the newer skills around computer science, which is important, but the traditional skills of reading and writing are going to be crucial to make sure we get move ahead.
Martha, you talked about the AGs. One of the goals is to make sure companies play fair.
Mm-hmm.
But in your approval of the partners deal, you're essentially being accused of, allowing that company to grow too big. So can you just talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely.
And your handling of that, and you mentioned healthcare too as being really important.
Yes.
The cost of healthcare, and isn't one of the arguments of the opponents of the partners deal, it's going to make healthcare too expensive.
Well,
and our
remember,
own hospital right here is one of the hospitals that's, that has signed on in opposition to it. So.
yes, no, I understand, and remember, they're competitors, and they've been competitors for a long time, so not that they don't have issues, but I think you have to take with a grain of salt some of what they complain about in terms of, obviously, they would like partners to be smaller because they feel they would have more competition. That would make sense if this was just a manufacturing market or a technology market. Healthcare is its own unique market, and there are 3 things that we always strive for in healthcare. One is quality, which we have great quality in Massachusetts. One is access, which we did with healthcare reform. The third now is keeping costs down. And that is not the only goal. It can't be the only goal because we could keep costs down, but we would lose either access or quality. And frankly, a 4th issue around choice, people's ability to choose healthcare that they want and not be told by a single payer what they can get or what they can't get, which is some of the issues around that piece of it. So if you go back, Partners is probably too big. It got big about 20 years ago, and nobody or nothing changed that. It was getting bigger. Our office, frankly, is the only one so far that is disclosed and shown a light on what Partners was doing and why that market was dysfunctional. Because Partners had marketing clout that others didn't. They built up their brand. Everybody wanted to go to Mass General. They got good doctors. They also, we found in the studies we did that you can have a knee done in Mass General and up at Leahy or down at South Shore, and the cost may be half of that, but the quality is the same. That Partners was getting reimbursed for things because they could, and frankly, we all got health care and costs were going up 8 to 10% because nobody had, excuse the pun, nobody had any skin in the game. And healthcare used to be like the open bar at the wedding. You go to your doctor, tells you to do something. So 2 problems. Partners is big, and they have an increased ability to get reimbursed because everybody wants to have Partners on their list. They're an academic hospital. They do have expenses for research. We love our good quality here and our innovation in healthcare. But we also had a fee-for-service system. or if you do a thing, you get paid for a thing. And so if you go in and get your knee done, you know, you get reimbursed for that. And it became expensive. We're focusing on reimbursing for things people do instead of prevention and keeping people well. So as we tried now to move away from that through the legislation and pushing hospitals to do more accountable care, more prevention. For instance, if we could cut our rates of diabetes and asthma, we cut huge amounts of healthcare costs. All those kids and people that end up in an emergency room because they don't get the kind of treatment and prevention on those two healthcare cost drivers. And we have tried to, with legislation and with partners saying, so let's now get to the crux of the South Shore deal. We basically were told by the Health Policy Commission, and we agreed on our own with DOJ, that that agreement in and of itself would most likely provoke an antitrust trigger, and we would sue them for it. So our goal was to say, what could we do to address not just the bigness, but the cost of what they get to do by their marketing in this agreement? Can we negotiate something? Because we could have sued them, DOJ was prepared to, we were prepared to do it. All we would have been able to do is stop them from getting bigger. We wouldn't have cut costs, we wouldn't have done anything about what their market club currently is. And so we looked at what the range of options were. It is a long and complicated agreement, but it basically goes fundamentally to putting caps on what they can charge for the next up to 10 years, how many doctors they can acquire, which is how they also get a marketing plan. And I believe that if you really look at what we were able to do, and it's up to the court, and we're happy to have all the competitors bring their comments into the court, that not only are we accomplishing a better goal than just stopping them after 2 years or 3 years of litigation from acquiring South Shore, we are changing and making transparent over the next 10 years anything they do in terms of contracting and keeping their costs down. So it's not, they're already big. We weren't going to change the bigness. And if we were going to let them get bigger, we wanted to do something that would cut back the cost they got by being bigger.
What's the timetable of the court and the scrutiny that it's given?
August 5th. The judge, it's Judge Sanders, gave everybody time to file, which we're happy with. They can file their complaints or their issues, and it's not just the competitors, obviously anybody can, the Health Policy Commission can. She'll take a look at it, and her opportunity is either to say yes or no, and we'll see what she says. But I think if you really know the markets and you look at it, as some of the Health Policy Commission members have done, they think that this is a much better agreement for Massachusetts in terms of the cost control. And by the way, what Partner says, and we'll be able to see if it's true or not, that they will, by being able to push more care into the communities, they will keep some of the primary and secondary costs down. We want to watch that and make sure that's true. Because right now, remember what I talked about, everybody wants to go to Boston. You know, if you have a problem, you got to go to Boston. If they are able to provide the quality health care in the communities where they serve, they'll keep their costs down, and they say they want to put more into prevention and more into mental health issues.
Are you optimistic it will stick with seeing her scrutiny?
Yes.
Has the state had any success moving away from the fee-for-service system? I know that, you know, it was a year or two ago, the legislature did pass a bill to move toward, you know, global payment, I think was the phrase that they used. But during this campaign, I've heard all the candidates say, we need to move away from fee-for-service, we need to do this. So did that legislation not accomplish
it started it, no, and that's part of what is we've looked at, for instance, this acquiring of South Shore. Part of the deal is that Partners has to keep to its agreement to do more accountable care, more primary care in communities. They also work with places like Lynn Community Health, and we've pushed that. So the legislation has pushed people to do it. Blue Cross Blue Shield now has products that focus more on accountable care. What we didn't want to do, and what we couldn't do overnight, was go to, or what we definitely didn't want to do was go to a prior system, which was kind of capitation. Every person in the system has X amount of money on your head, and you can use that. What we're trying to do is move towards something that allows for more prevention, but also gives people the flexibility. If you need cancer treatments, or you have a child who has leukemia, or you have some extraordinary medical expense, how are we going to cover that and make sure people still have the access and choice that they want? Not just say as many dental products. I don't know about your dental insurance, but ours says you basically have $1,000 or $800. You need 6 crowns, too bad, you're on your own. You know, we don't want the healthcare system to be like that. We want people to be able to be encouraged from the beginning to have more ownership over their own health, know more about what their options are and how they can keep costs down, have employers keep costs down, while still providing everybody that access and choice they want to get the kind of care they need.
But how is this partners deal going to help community hospitals like Lowell, Lowell General, Lawrence? I mean, the problem here was that partners had gamed the system with the insurers, okay? And you put your governor's hat on. If you're the governor now, you said it's complex. Who's to say the next attorney general doesn't really care about keeping track of what's going on? And then another 5 years, we have another crisis. They just learn how to game the system. And it's built into the healthcare system now because of new regulations. Every day they're looking to cut corners to maximize profits. Okay, but how is it going to help the local hospital? Because they game the system. They're not really getting fined or anything for doing anything, and they'll just find another way. They're big enough to
Well,
find.
that is an argument. They're very good at what they do. There's no question. That's why they're good at brain surgery, and why they're very good at also their own advertising. I mean, they're very good at what they do. So that's a fair question, and keep in mind, we go back to what was in our toolbox. We could have just said, okay, we're going to sue you to prevent you from getting South Shore Hospital. You're big enough, We couldn't put a net around them and say you can't get any bigger. We can say you can't get South Shore Hospital. That's the way it works. And if we were successful, the only thing we would have accomplished was, they don't get South Shore Hospital. But it wouldn't change how they do business now or the way in which they contract and the clout they have under the current system. What we're trying to do, for your question, is with legislation, move them away more from accountable care to more prevention and be more transparent about it. But what this deal does, it does affect how much they can grow. Their growth gap is lower than what other hospitals like Lowell General or Leahy or some of the competitors claim now. Beth Israel, who's a big competitor, Steward, that is a for-profit. And so we're hoping, we don't have a magic bullet on this, but there are enough restraints on what they can do and how much they can grow, how much money they can make, that has to be transparent. And it doesn't prevent the Health Policy Commission in 4 years or 5 years, or I hope the next Attorney General will say, okay, but I guess what I find interesting is, until our office stepped in and did all these healthcare studies that showed this dysfunctional market and then got legislation to move, and we're the only people who have ever said anything but yes to partners. We said, no, you're not going to get South Shore unless we can work out something that we think not only addresses the issue of how you drive prices up, but it does it better than if we went to court just to prevent you from getting bigger. We've been able to fundamentally change the way you market, and not the way you market, but the way you contract.
I mean, when you came out with that study years ago, and we wrote about it, editorialized, showing how community hospitals sometimes, they do the same quality services for less money.
Yep.
Okay, but what has really changed? I mean, Lowell General still has to, form an alliance with Tufts. Lawrence General, they're forming an alliance with some. It seems like, despite all these things, and we hear now the Lowell General is, with the merger with Saints, they haven't grown any their client volume services. They're still not growing the way they thought they were going to grow. And there's something happening in this healthcare industry that the big just keep getting bigger and richer, and the community hospitals are still struggling.
Well, and if that, I think that merger with Tufts and Lowell General is a good thing, because if you start with the premise that, partners got big a while ago, and what the competitors are saying, hey, what do competitors in other markets do? Well, we need to compete. So they have formed those alliances that will let them, I think, provide for better community care as well as surgical care, and move towards a better model for providing prevention, but also healthcare services. I would argue, and we've said this to the competitors, that what we have done in this agreement, if the court approves it, is cut what partners can do substantially and allows you the time in the next 5 to 10 years to become more competitive. In other words, we've helped level the playing field a little bit with the large 800-pound gorilla and the 800,000-pound gorilla in this healthcare market to give opportunities to other hospitals to form those alliances, whether they become mergers or whether they form partnerships. And it is, look, it's a very much changing market. And it's not just the hospitals, it's also the, you've got 4 major players in terms of providers and payers. The 4, Fallon and Blue Cross and Tufts and who's the 4th one? The other insurance company that
Harvard.
Harvard, thank you, on the pillar. So it gives everybody a chance to say, okay, we put, so to speak, a net on partners for the short run. We're going to see what they're doing. We're going to be able to watch it. And by the way, you want to be competitive, you guys have to get in the game and do that. I think that merger with Tufts and Lowell makes a lot of sense, and I think it's good. You know, look, there was a potential merger with Leahy and some of the other hospitals. You should ask them why that didn't happen. We wouldn't have blocked that merger.
There will be many more. They have to. Stewart has some initial restraints and controls in place when they went through their acquisition spree. When does that expire? Because I
Actually,
think
pretty
there's-
soon, because that was 5 years.
Okay, and that's got to be a concern because they certainly haven't grown any more than they hope to. And the fear would be that now that those are done, they can make some significant cuts, if I understand correctly. And is that a concern as to what the landscape may look like once that agreement is done?
Yeah, well, look, part of what our issue was, and it was a little different because Stewart, as a for-profit, was acquiring not-for-profit. So that went under a much more rigorous review on our part. They were taking over assets of hospitals, by and large, were failing now, and had been propped up by taxpayer dollars for a long time. You look at Kearney, you know, Kearney always was propped up, and people said, well, let's see if this works. Everybody wanted to, I think they've been transparent, but it's a tough market. And, you know, Massachusetts is a tough competitive market. I think Stewart has done very well on some areas, but we're gonna have to see what happens. I don't see that if they're not successful, one of my concerns is that then we lose a big, you know, potential competitor for the market. There are other ways through not just our office, but a governor's office, you would look to make sure that they're not cutting corners or that they're complying with Chapter 93A and they're providing good health care. But they offer an option to a market that potentially could keep costs down also, as employers who are the main buyers of large plans. But you have other models too. You look at big companies that have become self-insurers, you know, and so that is not an unhealthy thing in this market, but it does make for some volatility. And as this plays out, the key thing is that for newspapers or for TV or for us, that we know what's going on. This had been previously a market that was just not transparent. And everybody, when we finally did those reports that showed what people got and the charges they got and what the, you know, that was stuff that people had thought anecdotally, but no one had ever put it together. And so this is going to take a while to play out. And I think that this agreement with partners, with the time period and the transparency, will let us see what is working, what isn't. And you know, I'm a big believer in the competition. I work closely with Leahy and the other hospitals also. Look, where I grew up, the hospital closed. North Adams closed. Not enough payers, you know, and we need to look at reimbursement rates for those other hospitals who are trying to compete with the folks who can get, you know, because of their brand or whatever, can get the paying clients. We need to provide access, real access around the state, and access for mental and behavioral health. So that is a big task and a big challenge. We've got Berkshire Medical has opened up the emergency room up there, but you want to look at an area that's tough economically, your hospital closes, what happens to the kids at North Adams State College, or the kids who are going to Williams College, or the businesses out there? You know, my classmate from high school is the mayor out there. He's got a big battle on his hands.
Well, that's a good segue into, you talk about these micro economies, you know, and I think, you know, 8 years ago we were talking about this, and it comes up every time there's an election. I mean, you can't tell people or businesses where to set up shop, but you could certainly entice them to go there.
Yes.
And I've been telling this to the former governors, you know, candidates and everything else. I mean, how do you get people to go out to the Berkshires and build affordable housing where they could use it and there's room to it, instead of keep putting affordable housing in Boston where everything's congested and every unit they put up is like 0.001% of the housing market, when if you put affordable housing out in the Berkshires or put it out in that end of the state, or even, you know, help out Lowell, Fitchburg, build it around centers where they need it, but you know, they keep investing in that Boston corridor. I mean, how do you get those people to look out there and make a smoother, more consistent economy and growth, and lower the costs? Because you got the pike, you got roads, infrastructure out there just as well as, but Boston just keeps getting more congested, more growth, prices keep spiking, healthcare costs go up.
Yep. No, I agree, and I think that's why, on the one hand, you know, everybody wants to be in Boston, Cambridge, and then you hear, well, they're just doing startups because then no one can afford to live there, and so part of the idea is, as I said earlier, all right, let's get some startups, but let's work on how we keep them here in places where, and I don't think it's just housing, I think you have to look at the transportation infrastructure. And I think the state, and I think frankly Governor Patrick, when he came in, as I did, thought we were going to have a booming, healthy economy, and look what happened. You know, it crashed. And so two things, I think it's on the mend, I hope it's on the mend, we need to encourage it, and we need to build it in a sustainable way, not just a big bust and boom. So I talked to the mayor out there about, you know, what could we do to get businesses out in Berkshire County? And it has been a struggle since, you know, my dad owned an insurance company out there. He retired in the early 80s when everything was becoming computerized. And that Chamber of Commerce and that Rotary and that business group has challenged for years and years. Now the internet helps a little bit because some businesses will come, but there's still parts of Route 2, I know this because I go back and forth all the time, where your iPad goes out and then your phone drops off. So we haven't finished the last mile, which is one piece. Also, I am aware that people like, you know, the distance, they don't want too much development, but you have a place like North Adams where no hospital, unemployment rate, and everybody moves out. That's a place on the downturn. So I said, what if we were to look at, you know, a new voc tech school out there that if you want to invest in a workforce, you develop a school in those 4 counties, which is one of the reasons why I think, I don't know why exactly the school building authority is with the treasurer. I think the school building authority should go to the governor, and the governor can then be a better partner to areas around investing with regional equity. So if you're able to do a new school out there, you'd have people who would stay, who would send their kids there. You would have businesses that grow up around that, and then you are able to say, okay, you want to do precision manufacturing based on some great idea that came out of Cambridge? Let's put it in one of those old mills out there. As they're starting to do in Holyoke, they're starting to do around the state. And you have to have those things connected, those dots connected, but you have to stay on it. You can't just do one thing. But interesting, the voc techs, I think, are one of the big keys to this. Kids, so the mayor went to McCann Regional Voc Tech after 8th grade, and I went to St. Joseph's, and I graduated from Drury. At the time, and he's the first to acknowledge it, if you were going to college, you went to school, and if you weren't college material, you went to the Voc Tech. And I think in Massachusetts, we've always had that look down a little bit on, oh, these kids aren't the good academic material. I think that's totally turned around. I think you go to Lynn Vocational Technical, and they've got the new school, the North Shore Voc Tech, that's going to be state of the art. I did the graduation speech for the old one, the last one, and they're talking about this new Voc Tech. There are going to be people lining up to send their kids because they're good academically. The kids are getting real skills that will give them jobs. They get co-ops. I talked to a kid at Lynn Voc Tech. He's got a 4-year engineering scholarship to go to Bucknell, at a school where 10 years ago those kids probably never thought about college. But they are getting both the academics and the experience that some of our high schools aren't. So I'd like to first get rid of that stigma about, you know, high school is high school. We want our kids to learn things that will help them do well and be good citizens and good professionals and give them the opportunity to get jobs. Those are then ways in which you get a business to move in here. Remember that business that said we need people with a good 8th grade education? If you can do some of the manufacturing that we're doing now around the clean energy industry, you can provide the workforce and the training for that. You look at EMC, works with Bunker Hill Community College. you know, National Grid works with Worcester Polytech to make sure kids are getting the curricula they need for what the jobs actually require. You can do a much more and a better alignment, take Lowell with what's happening in the high school, what's happening with businesses up here, with the UMass Lowell and the colleges that are around, the 2-year and the 4-year, and say, how do we create a path for kids in high school to see what they need to learn if they want to go to these and have these jobs? And what a lot of that's in place already. One of the great things about running for governor is you get a good education. People have thought about this. Their plans are there. I see me as a governor who will be a good partner to that. And look, we don't always agree on everything here, but you guys know I'm a hands-on kind of guy. I want to make sure that we move this economy ahead, and we can do it if we connect those dots. And the state should be a better player as we look at the foundation for what we give to schools in terms of making sure kids are getting that good education. We provide that pathway to success for kids to go to high school or voc tech, and then 2 years after that, we work with not only what is happening at UMass Lowell and UMass Dartmouth and UMass Amherst, but with all of our great not-for-profits around 2-year and 4-year schools. And this is a place where people are going to want to be. And I think that is how we build that sustainable economy. And you need to have people in a governor's office, not just the governor, but a cabinet that focuses on and pays attention to that. It means having the right people. I'm proud of the people I was able to attract in the Attorney General's office. Good lawyers who said, you know what, I paid my law school loans, I really want to go do important, interesting work on behalf of consumers, on behalf of healthcare. We started our healthcare division, we started our cybercrime division. We're the first and only state to challenge the Defense of Marriage Act, and look where we are. You know, everybody says, oh, that looked easy, but it wasn't, because we dug in and did it. I would take a look at the cabinets we have and how they're structured. I know from my time as a prosecutor, I know how we can do better with DCF and how we can do better with GMH, break down some of those silos in the administration, focus on the regional issues and connect those dots. There's just so much opportunity here in Massachusetts.
So is there any cabinet that you might launch, a new cabinet, and take away something like, take away the education department and start a new one, a technology department or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
Are there any, I mean,
Some of
government
this-
could use restructuring all the time, we say, but what is it, you know?
What
maybe-
would you do? Well, I did that as AG. I came in and took a look at how were we structured, and so a couple things, we didn't have a healthcare division, and I knew we were going to need one, so we added that expertise. And then all of our healthcare people get stolen by the Health Policy Commission, because that's where they get the expertise to do that work. For some of the cabinet restructuring requires legislative changes, but certainly in terms of laying out, for instance, I think EEOHS is just too big. There's too much responsibility in that secretariat. So if you separated out the healthcare piece and had that as a separate cabinet, and then you could focus on the social service work, the DCF, the DMH, the DPH maybe, and break down those silos. Just let me give you an example. We have a kid in 3rd grade who's not going to school or is not doing well, whatever the reason is, and someone files a 51A. Let's get right on that. Let's get, see what the family needs, see what the child needs. Let's not wait until we have a social worker go through and say, well, there's no problem here. Let's be proactive and giving that family the help they need, whether it's they don't feed the child properly, or the child doesn't have dental care, or there's actual abuse that needs to be addressed. Let's have a DCF that focuses on child safety as well as keeping families together, but not merging that mission in a way that I think makes it impossible for them to do their job very well. You just have to look at Jeremiah Oliver and Justine Pelletier. You know what? We leave kids in and we take them out. And we could do so much better with restructuring that agency and having teams that focus on who are the 10 or 15% of kids who really are at risk for physical, sexual abuse, that then go to the DA's office, look at sane teens, and then focus on getting those families back up on their feet that need it.
Why not, why is government, just getting bigger and involved more and more in what's taking place in the families, instead of turning it over to the professionals? Why isn't that outsourced and the state monitors what they do? you know, like, you have kids in medical school and college who could be working for the state or a third party, doing these things, getting training besides working with the experts. Why do we have social workers that are employed by the state, okay, and work to the regulations of the state? Most of them unionized now, okay? Why can't Massachusetts, like some other states, shed that and hold everybody accountable? You know, why do we have this this continuing, expanding bureaucracy that when you look at its job performance, it hasn't done very well, and I don't think it's going to get much better, no matter how many laws are passed and everything else.
Yeah,
Just
no,
as a quick follow-up,
yeah.
there was a column in the Globe yesterday by, who's the Republican guy? He was
Jeff
talking.
Jacoby.
Yeah, and he talked about Lombardo from Bill Rica and Lyons, how they voted against the budget. Simply because they felt that, that this Patrick was just pouring money at these agencies, including the DCF.
Yep.
But not doing the restructuring or the real introspection that's needed to fix them and to prevent future Jeremiah Olivers.
Yep.
And I read it, and I don't normally read him, but I read it, I said, geez, this guy's got a point, that follows on his point. And I think it said in that column that under Patrick, state government has grown to like 10,000 employees. I don't know if that's true or not, but it just made me think, and that's it seems that all this money is going to these agencies.
We're doing healthcare, we're holding everybody accountable, we're doing this accountable, but yet the state continues to just get so wide and spread out. I mean, God forbid you're the governor. I mean, you can't be watching everything. You're going to depend on people to do the job, but it's that underbelly. They've just been running the same culture or the mindset for generations. Okay, and that's why no one thought it was a problem not checking up on a family for 3 months and just filling out reports because they knew someone else did it, they did it. Okay, and then they come back after the governor has put $3 million in the last 3 years to get the caseloads back. First it went from 25 to 21, down to 18, now we're going down to 15. And I bet you within 2 years, no matter who's the governor, there'll be another case like this.
Oh, there's no question about it. I see a new secretary of EOHS right here. I hear you, but let's do the partners analogy for a minute. Just because, bigness in and of itself is not the problem. It may be, but it may not be. And one of the things I said early on is that I saw some things that the governor did well and maybe some things he didn't do so well. I don't think under Governor Coakley you would have an Annie Ducan. I don't think under Governor Coakley you would have New England compounding. I would hope that from my experience in the criminal justice system and oversight with public safety, with the lab work, everything I know about DCF from the work I've done in child abuse, there are ways that we can not just restructure on paper, but actually put people in charge and systems in charge who are accountable. It does become a problem, and in fairness to the governor, there was no money anywhere. And this problem, Jim, this goes back to every Democrat and Republican governor I've served under. Every single head of DSS then and DCF has said, we make 2 mistakes. We leave kids in and we take kids out. And that has happened historically. You've been around long enough, you've seen it. I can't guarantee ever that it won't happen, but we should be doing better. And I think there are ways that if you bring in people with the real expertise, not just the policy and the theory and what we need to do on paper, but how you make it work and how you hold people accountable with better platforms and technology. We have a lot of upgrading to do with how the state works. We shouldn't be faxing 51As to police departments. No, but if you haven't had the money to do it, it's really hard to upgrade all those agencies when you come in. And, the governor came in, I think, well-intentioned. I mean, nobody wants this to happen, and so we have to work from the ground up and do better oversight and management. And by the way, on the DCF side, we actually do subcontract with a lot of people to do Home for Little Wanderers, to do all the care providers, kids who are fire setters, kids who need a home. We do that, and we should take a look at it. But we need people, I think, who are within the mission of DCF to do that intake day in and day out to make sure that we are accountable. And then we do a placement, and then we have someone to make sure that kids either taken out if he needs to be, put back in when it's safe. Look, if mom's boyfriend is dealing drugs, then it's probably not safe for the child to be there. But if mom gets rid of boyfriend, then maybe child can go back. You know, once DCF takes a child out there, they rarely reverse it. And we have an old-fashioned, unwieldy system. Do we take kids in? Do we leave them out? And they're always going to get it wrong if they're not more finely tuned on how we make these decisions and how
You
we
had said-
provide better accountability.
You had said under your administration there wouldn't have been a New England compounding or an Annie Dugan. How would things have been different? What safeguards would have been in place where those stories would have happened?
Well, so Governor Patrick comes in and he inherits a system that's been in place for a long time, under other governors also, where you have state police in charge of some of the labs and you have DPH and some of other labs. So Department of Public Health is doing determinations on lab samples that are for criminal cases. And neither the mission of DPH, nor the supervisors, nor the people who work there, I think had any real sense of what was at stake if you were going to not do a criminal sample right. If you're not going to do this, you know, they're testing, not that we want quality control throughout everything we do, but the mission for a laboratory that is testing drugs day in and day out to be used as evidence beyond a reasonable doubt at a trial is very different from the missions that they have. There was lack of oversight on that particular young woman.
From the state police?
No, she was under DPH at the time.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So she was more from a civilian point of view
Yes.
as opposed to law enforcement?
Yes, and now the state police have taken over the labs, and they are accountable to whoever the Secretary of Public Safety will be, and a governor who gets that we have to do this right. And we need to both have a system that works better and is more accountable to the courts, but knowing what the stakes are if you do something wrong. I mean, that just shouldn't have happened. And we charged her, and we found her, she was found guilty of that. But nobody thought she was doing anything other than just trying to do her job. And trying to, you know, she got pats on the head. Oh, that's great, you're doing all these samples. You're moving these cases along. And nobody,
And no one raised a question.
nope.
What about New England compounding? How would you have headed off that issue?
Well, this is an issue, and I know the details of that less because we were not directly involved in that. But now you have something in this state that is not really under federal control very well and not really under state control. And so you have something that employs people sending products out, not just potentially, but in fact, toxic to people around the country that we had some responsibility as a state to ensure the quality control for, and it fell through the cracks. I think that, you know, if I'm the next governor and I come in and I want to take an inventory of who owns what are we responsible for, who's doing what, and you bring in the people who are then accountable with the people below them who are accountable for what is the mission, what are we trying to accomplish, is it something that we need to radically change or do we just need to tweak around the edges? And how do we make sure that the public knows that the dollars it spends, because I do believe this, people don't mind paying taxes if they're not going to be wasted. They know they need to invest in schools and roads. They want a healthy economy. They want to help people who are off the ladder at the moment, who need food for their kids. They don't want it wasted. And I pride myself as an Attorney General of being accountable to taxpayers. For every dollar I get, we bring back $10 in a given year. Sometimes it's more than that. And we hold businesses who break the law accountable. I should hold agencies accountable who aren't doing their job. And I think I have some ideas about where the state can go and where our future is. I also know that we have to do it in a way that's accountable to the public. And I have a record of doing that, and I would bring in people who would help me do that. Quick example, I came in at the end of the big dig, right? That tile fell on poor Melina de Valle, killed her because wrong glue was used. This was a wonderful public-private partnership. Everybody owns some of it, Governor Well, Charlie Baker, our congressman, everybody owns some of it. That's fine. My job was to clean it up, and we brought in the federal authorities. We did federal, state, civil, criminal charges. We got it resolved. We put $500 million into a trust for a flawed tunnel, so that money's available as we go through. And you know what I said? When we're getting the stimulus money coming in, I don't want to see another big dig. We had money coming in that some was going directly to weatherproofing companies. Some was going to state agencies. Some was going to cities and towns. I said, we're going to track that money. We're going to see where it goes. And I don't think there's been one penny that went awry. And that's not a big news story, right? There's no corruption. There's no scandal. We prevented that. And that money went, I didn't always agree with where it should go, but we made sure it did because we brought in Suzanne Bump and the federal authorities And we sat, as we did on CBJ meetings, and said, how do we solve this problem and how do we prevent it? And that's what I can do as governor. My big issue is how do we turn this economy around? I'm gonna sit and bring the people in who can help make sure that we do it for every part of the state. And I've been so convinced of this. I feel running for this job the way I did running for DA or running for Attorney General. I can do this job. I know I can do this job. And I don't know everything. I'm not perfect. But I have put a lot of my time and energy into public service. And I love it. And I will bring people in who feel the same way, that we have to be transparent and accountable. And we will continue to keep Massachusetts on the right path.
So here's a change. Do you like the Olympics coming to Boston?
I actually do.
You do?
Arthur, you brought up Hamilton Canal, which is a very important economic development project in the city. And one of the big components was the judicial center,
Yes.
and the governor has dragged his feet on that
Yep.
for 6 or 7 years. Will Governor Coakley make sure Lowell gets a judicial center?
Yes. I think that kind of development, including making sure that our court system, I know how important that is from my experience in it, and making sure that it has the resources to provide for this community and the surrounding communities that the courts serve. The courts are one way that people come in, and being able to have a center that has the resources for judges and probation officers, but also the links to the resources for people who have behavioral disorders. I think that's really important project up here, and I would make it a priority. One of the changes that I think have been good, you see a police department like Framingham, and more of them do it. If there's a 911 call, they bring a social worker along. And if it's a drug overdose, if it's someone who's mentally ill, obviously arrestable, but doesn't have to be arrested, they divert that person into the services they need. It saves court time, we get a better outcome on it. You know, the courts unfortunately have become the last resort for too many other social ills, and we need to do it right. But I'm convinced from the time I spent here, the time I spent in the child abuse unit, as district attorney in the biggest county in the state, that there are lots of ways that we can address those issues better, less expensively, and with much better outcomes for people in their communities.
No, I know Governor Patrick, he's been a big supporter of giving in-state tuition to undocumented children, students who've been in the system. I don't think he's come out, but he's implied that he's in favor of giving driver's licenses to same thing, undocumented people. Where do you stand on this? And I know it's been convenient for people in the past to say, well, that's a federal issue, and we're going to wait till they resolve it. But
Not so much anymore. I mean, it's not clear they're going to resolve it.
now we got them landing at Hanscom, and we just put in a FOIA request to the federal government to find out what happened to those people, and they won't give us. And I'm very surprised that even the Congresswoman's office won't give us any information on it. So it's like it's a big secret and stuff. Does the Attorney General know what happened?
I
to those
have no
3
idea
flights?
about that. In fact, because people ask me, like, when was this, 2 weeks ago? The information?
Right, it was almost a month.
Yeah,
a month
just
ago?
a month ago.
I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, I spend a lot of my time suing the federal government. They only tell you things they want. I mean, look, I sued FEMA on the flood map issue. I've gone after DOMA, I've gone after NOAA. I spend a lot of my time going after federal agencies with 4 letters in their names. I don't know anything about that particular incident and what's going on. I've been watching the news around what's happening in the Texas borders, big talk show issue with Governor Perry this week. But on the in-state tuition, the governor has an executive order. I wouldn't change that. I think at this stage, if kids are here and they want to go to school and they're eligible, they get an in-state tuition rate. And to my, at least as far as I know, they're not blocking that opportunity for anybody else. So that is an investment in them if they're here. I do support the DREAM Act. I'd hope there'd been a national solution, a federal solution to this. I think with Eric Cantor's defeat, that probably means in the short run we won't see it. It's unfortunate because there are too many things the federal government has to do. I have in the past been against driver's license, but I've said I'll keep an open mind. A lot of states have started to do it. I want to see what other states are doing. I understand the issues on both sides of the argument, but at some stage, if the federal government doesn't do anything, we're going to have to make some decisions about what we do here in Massachusetts. my job as DA and AG has always been, if people are victimized, if they've been cheated, I'm not gonna pay attention to their status, I'm gonna make sure that people who exploit them are held accountable. So I know this is gonna be an issue in the next few years. I wanna see what other states have done and what's successful. I would talk with law enforcement, and talk with people in communities about what the issues are.
Can you tell us what you learned in your Senate race, in your unsuccessful Senate race, and how you're applying it to this race?
Sure. Special elections are tough, especially special elections where, nobody wanted or thought that Ted Kennedy was gonna die. It was very sad, the loss of Ted Kennedy, and I think for everybody, including me, the loss of his seat was still resonating with people. I know that because I hear it on the campaign trail. Without making excuses, it was a short race. We jumped in, didn't have any ramp for it, won the primary, and people said, "Oh, you're all set. Don't worry about it." And of course, we did worry about it. We were back on the line raising money, and it was a lot of things, I think, in that race, including that people felt they didn't see me enough or that I wasn't campaigning hard enough. I was working. We had to raise money because we knew we were going to have a big air war. We had people coming in from out of state. I was traveling around the state. We had people at our rallies with Arizona, California, Texas plates who were pretty unpleasant, frankly. People were angry. Everybody in the country was angry. And that race became a focus for the healthcare issue, for the underwear bomber that happened right before it. And, we weren't ready for it. I didn't do as well as I should have or could have. And I said, if I'm going to get in this race for governor, I want to put together a team. I want to do a grassroots campaign. I need people to see me, not just, trying to raise money for television. I need to be out campaigning every single day. And we've done that. I have just came off our 2-week on our terms, the same thing I've talked about, let's build an economy on our terms. I've been in Dorchester and Fitchburg and out to Pittsfield and in Worcester, exactly asking people the questions I'm talking about today. What do we need to do in your region to help provide employment? There's still a lot of people unemployed. Higher rates here, in Lowell, in North Adams, in New Bedford. Many people 50, 60 years old, they can't afford to retire and they can't get a job. So those are issues we need to address. But I've been talking to folks campaigning retail, campaigning in small groups, and it's been fun, actually. So I think people are getting to see me in a way that they didn't in the Senate race. And I understand how difficult that race was and the loss was. I know that I'm going to have to earn every vote and shake every hand to do it, but I've made that commitment to do it.
So do you think you kind of took that race for granted a little bit?
I don't think I did. I think people's perception was that I did, and I understand that perception. I know why they saw that. And so I'm not apologizing for losing the race. I am sorry that we lost, and I'm sorry. But I did get right back to work after that, and I went to work as AG, and I thought, this is going to be tough, but I think the one thing that one day I was out getting signatures right a month or so after the loss. I was out at a supermarket in Arlington. I saw a gentleman who had on a military cap and a jacket, and looked like he might have been a Scott Brown voter. And I went and asked for his signature.
It was Peter Lucas.
It wasn't Peter, but I asked for his. I said, I'm Martha Coakley. I'm running for Attorney General. I'd like to have your signature. And he said, Martha Coakley. He said, I voted for Scott Brown. Then he said, but you're a good AG, I'll sign your papers. And I thought, well, maybe I can do this. And it's actually, I ran, races for DA and AG again. I've won pretty handily. I think people think I've done a good job. There were just so many things about that race, including, this all played out on the national scale. And I know people were upset by it. And I know that, I was blamed for it. And I don't. When I say I don't apologize, I don't mean that. I take responsibility for it. I certainly know that I was the candidate. But I do think I got back to work and have showed people that. But I also know I have to prove it in this race, that I intend to campaign hard. I intend to tell people about why I want to be governor, and they need to meet me and shake my hand.
Are you concerned at all about the results of the convention? You went into that with a pretty big lead in the polls, and then finished third, I believe, right? Pretty close with Berwick.
We were second.
Just ahead of Berwick. And what do you make of that result? And if you look, if you go back and look at previous elections, I think the last time the candidate that didn't get the endorsement lost was 1990 with, I think Frank Bellotti he got the endorsement and lost to Silber. But if you look at all the elections from then on, typically the candidate that gets the endorsement ends up getting the nomination.
Yeah, but each one of those is a little different. And let me just say, we have always looked at that as a qualifying convention. This idea that somebody wins or loses the convention is actually depends, you know, if you're a goal and you think it helps you to say you've won the convention. The convention is about who can get on the ballot. Can you get 15%? And with 5 good people in the race, actually, if all 5 got on, nobody would have won. And the guy who won, you know, had 34%. So we make very little of that. We did exactly what we wanted to do, which is have a strong showing at the convention, get our 15%. I think that the Democratic primary was made stronger by the 5 people in it. So we weren't concerned about whether other people got on or didn't get on, and who won it really didn't have too much relevance, we think, to the primary. We were proud of our results. We were exactly where we wanted to be. We had a lot of support at the convention, so I was happy with it.